the Sibbet Demand Index Divergence indicator, which is available for various platforms on the TradingFinder website. From this section, you can download the indicator file for MetaTrader 4 and MetaTrader 5 platforms and run it on your chart. Additionally, traders can read this page to learn about how the indicator works and its functionality. From the Navigator section, select the indicator file and drag it onto the chart to run the indicator. Once the indicator is activated on the chart, a histogram window will appear at the bottom of the chart. The Sibbet Demand Index Divergence indicator is a tool that displays buying and selling pressure, showing the zones for buying and selling. Additionally, this indicator plots the divergence between the price chart and the histogram, allowing traders to perform more specialized analyses on the chart based on the displayed divergences and to enter positions when there is a phase change and buy or sell signals are shown. This indicator identifies two types of divergence. The first divergence is between the highs and lows of the histogram and the price. Here, we can see that the price is making higher highs and higher lows. But on the histogram, two lower highs have formed. This divergence is displayed as a solid line shown in red. Similarly, in this section, we can see that the price is making lower highs and lower lows, while in the histogram, higher lows are being formed. This divergence between the histogram and the price has been identified and is drawn with a solid blue line. Another type of divergence is based on two phases, where the price moves from a downward phase to an upward one and then enters a downward phase again. Here, a divergence between the low of the histogram and the low of the price has been identified. In this case, the price forms a higher low, but the histogram forms a lower low, and this divergence has been drawn for us. At another point, we can see that here, the price is making lower highs, but in the histogram section between the two phases, where there was first an upward phase, then a downward phase, and after that it entered another upward phase, a higher high has been formed. This divergence has been illustrated for us using dotted lines. Traders can confidently enter a buy position when the histogram values are clearly above the zero level, or based on the observed price movement, they can meticulously analyze the market for a sustained upward trend. And when the histogram values are below the zero level, it indicates a downtrend in the market, and we can consider the signal line crossing below the zero level as a sell position and enter a trade accordingly. Or, when the signal line is above the zero level, we can enter a buy position. Additionally, this insightful histogram clearly displays its significant values in two distinct colors. For example, when it is actively changing its phase from a bearish trend to a more bullish outlook, it subtly shifts its coloration from a light red to a deeper, dark red. And when it precisely moves from positive bullish values to gradually decreasing positive values and then heads toward a negative territory, the histogram's values are prominently shown in a vibrant dark green. The overbought and oversold levels are also based on the positive and negative C values, which are plotted here. And when the histogram values enter the overbought zone, we can exit the position, as this indicates a potential price reversal in the trend. And when the histogram values precisely enter the deeply oversold zone, it clearly indicates the definitive end of the significant downward trend in the market and strongly suggests the distinct possibility of a substantial trend reversal. In the Settings section, under the Input tab, there are options available to us. In the first input, we can set the calculation period length of the indicator. The higher this value, the larger price movements it calculates, and the lower this value, the smaller price movements it takes into account. In the next input, we can precisely set the phase value, which is a crucial coefficient applied in the calculation of the histogram. The higher we carefully set this value, the faster the phase shifts from a buying state to a selling state and from a selling state to a buying state. Normally, these calculations are considered to be entirely linear, but here we can dynamically change its values. In the next input, we can enable or disable the double option, which relates to the histogram calculation formula. If we set this parameter to true, the speed of changes and the histogram sensitivity coefficient to price movements will increase and become doubled. But normally, when this option is set to false, the calculations are considered linear. In the next input, we can also adjust the signal length values, which pertain to the calculation of the moving average that is applied to the histogram and is displayed with a pink line. The lower we set this value, the less sensitive it becomes to the histogram, and of course, the accuracy of the signals also decreases. If we increase this value, the signals are generated with more delay but with higher accuracy. In the next input, we can set the signal phase value, which is a coefficient applied to the signal length and can be used to change the phase of the signal. In fact, this parameter controls whether we apply a greater coefficient to the rate of change. In the next input, we can enable or disable the signal double option, which is the calculation formula for the signal line. If set to double, it will have twice the sensitivity, and if this option is set to false, the calculations will be done in the normal way. In the next input, we can enable or disable the intermediate option, which puts the indicator in oscillator mode. If we set this option to true, you'll see that the indicator turns into a binary 0 and 1 form. Whenever the green lines are above the 0 level, it indicates a buy signal, and whenever the red lines are below the 0 level, it indicates a sell signal in the market. Here we can view its values in this way and carry out our own analyses. In the next input, we can also enable or disable the display of divergence lines in the histogram panel. By default, this option is enabled, and if we set it to false, the indicator will not display the divergence values for us. But if we set this option to true, we can see that the divergence values are displayed on the histogram. The next input parameter is directly related to displaying divergence lines on the chart. If we enable this particular option, we can also clearly see the divergence lines prominently displayed on the chart. In the next two inputs, we can change the color of the bullish divergence lines and the color of the bearish divergence lines to any color we like. In the next input, we can set the values for unique ID, which is a custom parameter. When we want to run this indicator more than once on the same chart, it is necessary to enter a different value from the previous indicator so that there is no interference with the previous one. In the next input, we can enable or disable the histogram on slope value, which is related to the color change of the histogram. Whenever the slope of the histogram changes and it is in the positive area, it is displayed in a darker green, and whenever the slope changes and it is in the negative area, it is shown in a darker red. Here by default, it is set to true, and we can see the darker values here. When the histogram is in the positive area and the slope changes and moves toward the negative, it is shown with a dark histogram, and when it is in the negative area and the slope changes and moves toward the positive, it is displayed with dark red values. If we set this option to false, we will see the histograms displayed in the normal way. The next input is related to interpolate, which we can enable or disable. In the next section, we can enable or disable the alert sending status. If the alerts option is set to false, the following options will not be applicable either. However, if this particular setting is indeed set to true, then important alerts will be promptly issued to us in the event of a significant phase change. Furthermore, in the subsequent input, we will have the capability to either enable or disable the alert sending status specifically for the on-slope condition. In the very next input, we can potentially have various signals issued directly to us while the candle is still actively open and trading. However, if we meticulously set this particular option to false, the system will patiently wait for the candle to fully and completely close its trading period, and only then will it subsequently issue the relevant and appropriate signals. In the next input, we can enable or disable the status of sending alerts as messages on the screen. In the next input, we can enable or disable the status of sending alerts as sound. In the next input, we can enable or disable the status of sending alerts to the mailbox, and if this option is set to true, you must have completed the email settings in the Tools tab under Options. In the next input section, we can also easily enable or conveniently disable the visual display of various signals, and if this particular option is thoughtfully set to true, then clear and actionable buy and sell signals will be automatically generated for us. In the next input, we can precisely set the alert calculation mode, which is directly related to the specific formula used for effectively displaying signals. By default, we typically receive a signal when there is a significant change in both the direction and the slope of the histogram. Here we are able to conveniently view the generated signals in this particular way, allowing for a clear and comprehensive understanding of the data. Here we can see that the direction of the histogram has changed from light green to dark green and a sell signal has been generated. Or at this point, the histogram has changed from red to dark red and a buy signal has been generated for us. However, if we meticulously set this particular option to false, then whenever the signal line precisely moves either significantly above or substantially below the established zero level, a clear and distinct buy or sell signal will be automatically generated, providing immediate actionable insights. Here we can clearly observe that the signal line has indeed moved significantly above the crucial zero level, and at this precise moment, a definitive buy signal has been successfully generated for us. Conversely, or alternatively, at the specific point where the histogram values begin to enter the negative area, a clear and unmistakable sell signal has been effectively generated for us at this particular juncture. Depending on the type of strategy, we can change these values. In the next input, we can also assign a name to the indicator signals, which is useful when we run another instance of the same indicator on the same chart and need to change this name compared to the previous indicator so that the values of the two indicators are different from each other. In the next input, we can also set the value for the distance between the signals and the candles, which is set to 1 by default, and we can change this value. For example, by setting the value to 3, we can see that the amount and distance between the signals and the candles changes, and if I change it back to the default setting, we can see that the distance between the signals and the candles becomes shorter. In the next two inputs, we can change the color of the signals to any color we want. The first input is for the buy signal or upward signal, and the second input is for the sell signal or downward signals. In the next input, we can also change the code related to the signals, which refers to MQL codes. If needed, we can use these codes to change the shape or type of the signals and adjust their values based on MQL codes. In the next two inputs, we can also change the overbought level, which is set by default to positive 30, and the oversold level, which is set by default to negative 30, to any desired levels. In the next input, we can also easily change the maximum number of candles for identifying and displaying the histogram values to any desired amount. By default, it is set to 1,000 candles, meaning the indicator goes back 1,000 candles from the latest or current candle, calculates the values, and then displays them clearly. In the next section, we can also enable or disable the option to send alerts as notifications to our mobile device. And finally, in the last section, we can set the timeout values, which determine the amount and interval the indicator considers before issuing signals. By default, this is set to 4, meaning that signals remain valid and are issued for up to 4 candles. In the next input, we can also choose the subject or custom message here as we wish. Well, friends, we've reached the end of this indicator tutorial. We'd be happy if you share your comments and suggestions with us in the comments section.